Hey, welcome back to season 3 of Detection at Scale. Today, I'm here with Erik Bloch, who is the VP of Security at Illumio. Hello, Erik. How are we doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. It's an awesome Monday here. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. It's 4th of July week, so, folks will be hearing this in a few weeks, but kind of a calmer week for some people getting out of town, taking some time off. I'm really excited to chat with you. You've had a pretty incredible background. So why don't we start with that? How did you get into security and, how'd that lead to what you're working on right now?
Well, that's a short story. So I joined the military after high school, way back in 1990, showing my age here. And I had a background in computers. I had a Commodore, VIC-20, Commodore 64 that I'd used when I was smaller. And when I joined the military, they give you a test called the ASVAB to see what you're good at. Turned out I was good with computers. So they put me behind a computer. And after getting in trouble for breaking into our battalion headquarters a few times and changing some test results, I got transferred to a special forces unit at Aberdeen Proving Grounds in Maryland, where they were basically stealing stuff from friends and foes alike, and they'd bring it back to us to reverse engineer. That's kind of where I kind of got my first kind of drops of security. From there, I got out of the military, went to college, and then I was number 14 on Cisco's information security team when they first made their first information security team. And when I joined there, I happened to walk in and get dropped right into a case called Boxcar. This was when Huawei, the Chinese telecommunications company, had stolen all Cisco's source code. And so they kind of dropped me right into the middle of this. It was me and another person doing that investigation for the span of about a year and a half. And that led to me starting the CERT team at Cisco and leading it for about 4 years. So that's how I got my start in security operations.
How did that lead to where you are right now? So Cisco and a lot of other experience there. What are you doing right now at Illumio?
Right now, I lead the entire security organization. I also, have my fingers in the cookie jar on the product side and helping our field teams message it and stuff like that. Because we're selling our product to people like me now. And so it's kind of all my backgrounds led to here. Plus, I was familiar with the founders of this company. I was at Salesforce. We were one of their largest customers back then. So, it's about who you know, right? But yeah, I've spent about, probably 2/3 of my career doing security operations in one form or another, either working in a SOC, building SOCs, leading security operations functions, leading IR teams, uplifting detection programs or whatnot. Or I even spent some time as a product manager building SIMs for 2 different companies as well.
I know a lot about that. It's not fun.
Yeah, it's not a lot of fun. A lot of work.
Yes, a lot of tedious and very deep work that has to go on to make that really work. So before we recorded, one of the things I've been talking a lot about in this season is really just around the intersection of Gen AI and SecOps. And I loved your answer to that note. You were like, well, I have a really contrarian view, which is that getting the basics right is more important. I'd love to hear your perspective on that in longer form for others to really grasp and understand that perspective.
Sure. You were seeing how I thought about kind of generative AI and how it's affecting the security operations space. And, from my last several roles from Salesforce to Sprinklr to Atlassian, what they all had in common was we didn't have the basic fundamentals in place to even operate as a fully functional team. Like when I got to Salesforce, our SOC, we had a SOC of close to 200 people in Bangalore, India, and we missed the SLA there between 70 or 80% of the time. And we had no metrics or measurements why we were missing it. We just knew we were. It held true when I was at, I was telling you when I was at Atlassian. When I first started putting some metrics in place, I saw my SOC team was leveraged between 130 and 200% of capacity 7 days a week. So big or small, it seems like most companies fail just doing the basics, putting in a process in place, putting in metrics and measurements to see what you're actually delivering to the company, seeing how effective you are at your detections that you're making, how effective you are doing triage in your SOC, how effective you are doing investigations and following up with the postmortem and post-incident review items. If you don't have the fundamentals in place, again, shiny objects or the newest tool isn't going to solve it for you. And this is kind of the story we've kind of played out the last 20 years. All these new tools that come out promising to kind of solve the SOC or security operations problem. But as you know, and I'm sure many of the listeners know, a tool is not going to solve for a missing process or a broken process. If your fundamentals are in place, it doesn't matter what tool you have, it's not going to fix the problem for you.
So what are you looking at necessarily? So you mentioned, you were tracking SLA, but you were missing it. So how do you work backwards from those goals, and like what have you put in place? Like, is there any particular pattern there?
I put in place just, well, I started just putting metrics in place. Most of the time, like as I'm doing here, when I go to put metrics in place, I realize you don't have the data to actually put the metrics in place to begin with, because again, your process is so ad hoc or haphazard. You don't have the correct data to do it to begin with. And so like what I did it, the last few roles is I start having people work through a process, and that usually involves it's super exciting using tickets, right? You're setting up Jira or ServiceNow or something like that. So you can actually start tracking the work your team is doing, what's coming in, what's coming out, and then start building metrics once you have that process in place. But even that first part can be a heavy lift for a lot of places if they're not used to using tickets, if they don't have, a process in place that relies upon tickets, people opening them up, closing them out, putting notes in there, having, actual states of the ticket to see if it's being worked on, if it's, in the queue, if it's being closed. And that takes some thought, and then takes some effort to put that in place. Once that is in place, then you can actually start doing some metrics. And again, like to the rest of the world, they probably hear this and say, like, I can't believe you guys don't do this. Because engineering works off of this. They have advanced metrics, sales teams, they work off of this. They have advanced metrics. Like everybody does. For some reason, a lot of security teams don't. I'm not saying all of them. There are some of them that do have, good ticketing systems, good process, good measurements. But for the most part, a lot of places do not. And I found once you put those processes in place, you can start measuring things like, team capacity and resource utilization, right? If you have, 10 people that work in your SOC and you have an SLA of, say, 1 hour per ticket, well, each person should be able to do 8 tickets per day. You multiply that 10 times 10 people, okay, you can work on 80 issues a day. Why are you pushing 500 per day at this team if their capacity is 80, right? Just really basic things you can start looking at to see what's working well and what's not. The same thing, you can start measuring your dispositions, what's coming out of your SOC. What outcomes are they actually producing for the company? Are they actually working on the things you thought they were working on, the things that they should be working on, or they're working on, busy work, stuff that has low impact and low value? But again, until you have insights into that, it's hard to kind of move the needle or adjust what your team is doing until you can actually see what it is they are doing. And this is where, these advanced tools come in. That's cool. You can come in and do all the work for me. But what if I don't know what my work is? What if I have no way to measure it? How would I know what to even point your tool out to begin with if I don't know what I'm doing? So yeah, I fall back to the basics. Once the basics working in place, once you have some metrics where you can actually start proving like this is what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, then you can actually identify your problems. Once you identify your problems, then you can bring in the additional investments of, a better tool to allow you to scale, or whatever it is, or another process or other people, whatever it is you need to start plugging these gaps to start moving the needles in the right direction.
And then in a lot of ways, you've done a lot of the homework before bringing the tool in, and then you can have an easier time justifying it to the rest of the team, why we need it, why we need the budget for it, and even talking to the vendor and saying, hey, this is what I'm trying to optimize for here. Because I think that really helps just build a lot of transparency into what you can do together to have success.
It really does. Once you know the outcomes you want to deliver to the company, not only do those outcomes, help you get the tool that you need, those outcomes also help justify the budget for it. And that's what I've, learned over my years. It's the same thing where, people will use, GRC to justify a budget item for some tool they have to buy. Hey, I have to have a PCI for WAF because it's required, or I need a WAF for PCI, therefore I need budget for it. Otherwise, you won't pass PCI. Okay, cool. That's an outcome that's easy to define. If you define other outcomes within your SOC, like, hey, we need to be able to process X amount of alerts, we need to be able to cover, our customer environments, whatever it is, if you define the outcome will help you define what the tool is you need to get, and the outcome will also help you define or justify the budget you need to acquire the tool.
And then it also helps, I think, develop leaders into being more self-sufficient in a lot of ways, right?
Oh, totally. I mean, this is why, to go off on a tangent, but when I talk to people that are on the board of directors, like here or other places, I talk to VCs who I advise sometimes, and they always say that, kind of the CISOs are sitting at the kids' table when it comes to the board. And when I ask them why, they're like, they're not talking to us in the language that we want to hear. Like all the rest of the teams, like, you know, if you have, you know, audit committee, everyone's getting 20 minutes and you get 5. Why is that? Because they're talking the language of the business and you're talking best guesses. You know, so you have a heat map and you're putting things on it where you think the risks are, while finance can come in and they give definitive numbers on, you know, what we have in the bank, what we think we're going to have in the bank next quarter, what we're going to have next year. Sales comes in, concrete numbers just from the pipeline. This is our conversion rate. This is how much money we're going to make this year. Like they all come with hard numbers that are actionable. And again, we come with best guesses and anecdotal information.
Why do you think that is? Like, I mean, there are a lot of ways to quantify security.
Oh yeah, there's tons of ways, right? But how do you make it so it's actionable and so that it actually provides value to your board of directors? When you think about what their motivation is, the board of directors' motivation is, I want this to be a successful company for us to make money on board customers, right? They don't care that, you know, hey, our IAM system doesn't protect, you know, some fringe environment that, you know, that they really don't care about. They want to see that security is helping support the business and achieve their goals. And again, if we come with, you know, anecdotal information where, you know, here's a heat map of all my leaders, put their risks on it. This is what we think the risks are this year. We want money to address these 5 things because they're our largest risks. Risk to what? You know, I remember going to a former CISO of mine, and he was going to present to the board to ask for money. And I was like, oh my God, you know, we worked 2,000 incidents last month. My R team did. And he was like, oh my God, Erik, 2,000 incidents. Should I fire you or give you a promotion? Because I have no idea what that means, right? And I was like, crap, I'm part of the problem, right? Until I could start talking in words that actually made sense or they could actually action, I was just talking, you know, more techno-babble.
That's so funny.
I kind of laughed too until I realized that I'm part of the problem. Like, oh crap, I'm regurgitating the useless information, right? To me, it meant something. To anybody above me, it was just a number. Like 2,000, is that good, bad, or other? Compared to what? You know, when I started turning it around and started making the information actionable, where I could say, hey, look, you know, this month my team was overutilized by 200%. We're 200% over capacity. Like that's something easy to understand. If I went to the board and say, look, you know, my team was putting in, you know, double shifts, they're burning out. Okay, what are the options? You can reduce the work or add resources. Right? It gives them a clear decision path. Yeah, that's an easy example, but that's the way the other teams go to, you know, the ELT and the board. They're coming with actionable data where they can make a decision off of. You know, if I'm coming to you again with anecdotal information, you know, hey, my team lead said these are the top risks. We want to address these 3. Like they're going to kind of scratch their head. Are these really the 3 things we should be addressing and throwing our money at? How does that tie to the business outcomes we're trying to achieve this year? Does that put them at risk if we don't fund them? You know, and again, it's learning how to talk the language of business. I mean, it's kind of been that horse has been kind of beat dead lately. But it seems to be that a lot of people, like, they have different opinions of what that means. And again, not to get too, you know, too high up there, but from my point of view, it goes back down the ground level and actually knowing what you're doing in this for security operations. If I don't know what I'm doing with the data, like I'm part of the problem. So hence why I like to focus on the fundamentals, you know, having a process in place, having some metrics in place, reflecting what we're doing, you know, how good are we doing it or how bad are we doing it? Identifying the things we're not doing good at. Hey, those are our gaps. I need to throw resources at that.
I like the intentionality of it.
I mean, it's today where, you know, funding is hard to get, you know, and everyone's asking for all the things. You know, security is never going to kind of keep up with the pace of the business. You're never going to cover all the bases. So it comes down to kind of ruthlessly prioritizing, you know, what can I do to protect what we have to protect so the company can achieve their goals this year? You know, whatever that looks like, every company will kind of be different in that space. But, you know, aligning yourself to that and being able to articulate what it is you need to actually hit those goals and milestones so the business can continue growing. If you can communicate that in plain English, you know, super easy to understand language with actionable data where the board can make a decision A or B, like this is how you're going to get traction. And again, it all goes back to the basics and the fundamentals of, you know, making sure you know what you're doing it correctly, and being able to measure it somehow.
So with a very clear picture of what is influencing your team's work and what's most important, how have you been thinking about throwing AI into the mix? Because this is effectively the promise of AI, is to 10x the team's output and do it better and, more efficiently use our resources? Like, how are you approaching sort of that conversation? And I'm sure you get a lot of questions from your executive leadership team and others about this.
Yeah, and we are operationalizing AI within our company. We're actually bringing in tools that have AI. We turn on the AI agent or the AI component for Slack and whatnot, right? So we're rolling out AI features for the company that we're reviewing. Our engineering team is also on the rollout, AI-based tools like Cursor to help code and whatnot, and test different models, MCP servers, everything else. And so we're reviewing that from a security point of view as well. So we're getting kind of a broad view of all the things that are going on. But again, both based on kind of the IT tooling we're bringing in and the engineering asks. As far as how we're using it for security, that's a whole nother can of worms. Because again, like we could go buy an AI tool today and throw it in here, but would it provide any value based on our maturity level, based on the work we have to do today, our current processes, kind of how we do work today? So from that point of view, like I'm still trying to get the fundamentals to work. And so we're ways away from actually operationalizing an AI tool on our side, at least from the operations side. Like we do use AI for GRC. We have like the LLMs that help us answer questionnaires or whatnot. And so we are utilizing it in kind of some point cases internally. But as far as, hey, we're going to bring in, an LLM or an AI-based tool to help with security operations. Again, until I have the metrics and measurements in place, until we have a process that works, that's repeatable, auditable every time, there's no use of bringing in a tool like that yet, because I couldn't tell if it was effective or not.
That's fair. I guess what's on your wish list? Like where do you see the biggest potentials? More of like a gut feeling versus, we have this data, I know exactly where I want to insert it. Like what's interesting and inspiring for you as a leader, sort of watching all the developments?
On the generative AI side and the AI for security in general, or specifically security operations, from what I've seen, MSPs, like managed service providers, the Sophoses of the world, the CrowdStrike SOCs, I think those guys will probably be the first early adopters of these AI. We're already seeing that they are. Because they are delivering kind of a unified service to all of their customers, it makes it easier for them to kind of standardize on tooling and kind of the alerts they have to deal with, which probably makes it a little bit easier lift for them to roll in some tools like this to help them become more efficient in delivering their services. I think that's where we're going to see the adoption first. We'll start seeing enterprise adopt it probably second, as they realize that, hey, look, we need to have certain things in place to make these tools effective. Again, not every place is a Google or an Amazon or a Microsoft where they have mature processes, but those guys are also like, they have AI tools in place because they have processes in place. If you go to the average, small enterprise, 5, 6, 7,000 people, 10,000 people, like chances are, I'd probably give a 75% chance they don't have what they need in place to actually utilize a generative AI or an AI-based tool to help in security operations yet. If they want to, boy, they have a path to get there. But again, it goes back to making sure those fundamentals are in place, making sure you have a process you can insert this tool into, making sure you actually track the work that it's doing and your people are doing so you can justify the spend, right? If you can't show the effectiveness of any tool you deploy, like how do you justify it? How do you justify the budget and the spend? And some of these tools, I've got to see a bunch of RSA, and they say that, hey, we reduce the time to triage by X amount of time. We can take care of, all these alerts for you, stuff like that. They're all kind of coming at it from different perspectives on the different types of problems they're solving. And from my point of view, again, having done this for a long time, there's always more work than your team can handle. And hopefully you're prioritizing the correct things for them to look at based on the capacity you have. But there's always going to be the other 95% of the stuff you don't look at. And that's kind of why you have an IR team, right? You cross your fingers, hope you don't get burned, but eventually you will. And that's why you have an IR function. If we have a tool that can come in and burn through that backlog, that would be amazing if it could actually go through the whole thing. At the same time, if you look at the backlog of the things that we're not doing, you could probably weed out, 70 to 75% of those things without needing generative AI or a model. You could probably just use statistics and machine learning to say, okay, these are obviously not bad. And so there's the analogy of looking for the needle in the haystack. And the modern approach, I think, is to actually remove the haystack or remove most of the haystack. And what you're left with are the things you can stick AI and generative AI tools on, because it's a much smaller subset.
I'm really excited about that world, by the way.
Oh yeah, me too. Like, I can't wait for us to get there. Again, it's early days now. And again, you talk to 10 different vendors, you get kind of 10 different approaches of how they want to tackle this problem. And which one's most effective? I don't know. Like, I don't think we're gonna know for a while, or it might be several different methods are really effective, depending on how your organization is laid out, how you function. Just like you look at the kind of the legacy, SIM market, right? There's different ways to do SIM. There's decoupled, there's centralized. I mean, there's distributed, there's all kinds of ways. And it, depending on the type of company and how you're laid out, different models work for different people. And so, like, there may be several different approaches, several different tools and methods you can use to solve these problems, again, kind of based on how your company is set up and how you do operations.
So with the progression of the organizations adopting AI as a whole, how do you think about security teams just in general, like building and using their own agents versus just using whatever the vendor provides?
That's a good question. I know today we're testing different models. Again, we're using Cursor for engineering, right? You can attach your different models to it. And the engineers are constantly trying to find the best one, best one, best one. This one's 1% faster, 1% faster, right? Let's keep moving back and forth. After a while, that game gets kind of old, switching things around, and you just kind of settle on one. This one's good enough. And I think the same thing will happen internally. I mean, security people like to build things, especially kind of one-off, magic box type things. And we're doing something similar here where we have some guys, working on some AI stuff, and they're making, different bots, using different agents or whatnot to kind of prove things can be done a certain way. But I think over time, again, as the space matures, they will become more commodity. So there'll be less incentive to build your own, and there'll be more incentive just to, get one off the shelf.
But is that true for highly specific agents? Because I could see that being the case for vendors providing capabilities.
Again, depends on what it is. Again, like, for security operations, I'm sure there's going to be a bunch out there. Like, there are people that are training models now, just for security operations, whatever that means. And so that there will be, off the shelf, specialized models that are tailored for our space. There will be people that want to build their own. There'll be vendors that will build their own, rather than, just have a wrapper around, OpenAI or whatnot. So again, like, what the best approach is, like, I don't know yet. Like, I'm kind of excited to see what kind of, once kind of the dust settles and we see what works the best. And again, I think it'll be a combination of methods. Like, there'll be some that are custom made, there'll be some off the shelf, there'll be some that are just wrappers. And it'll come down to, what's the problem you're trying to solve and which one works best for your environment and how you're set up.
Why do you think security teams like to build things? You said, security teams like to build things and prove they can be done a certain way.
I think it's just kind of in our nature. As you kind of come up and you get into the security world, you're very curious about taking things apart, breaking things or whatnot. But you're also, in order to do that, you have to also build your own thing that does that. So we're constantly hacking on code. A lot of the guys are not developers. They know stuff be dangerous, and they do. They'll build tools. They'll build what I call glue, things that ties different products together, or different APIs, or different capabilities together to kind of cobble together what it is they want to go quickly, or they think quickly. And then a lot of these things get rolled out to production somehow, or they don't. We end up going and getting a tool that does something very similar. But I think it's just kind of in people's natures. But we have to build things to be able to, tear things down or get the visibility we need. We're constantly making glue, is what I call it, to tie all these capabilities we have together. And this is where, kind of SOAR platforms became so popular so quickly, because it allowed us to make more glue with less code. At the same time, a lot of people still make glue. A lot of people are still code and making their own things. Again, we have people here that are experimenting with AI agents, MCPs, just to see what's possible. And we're learning from that. So when we actually go review an engineering application, like, we've actually kind of, made our own little sandbox over here where we can see the issues with MCP and A to A and these different types of agents. So we can see if those same problems exist in the tools that our engineers building.
I think just in general, MCP is a huge enabler of teams who like to build.
Oh yeah,
and
all these things. It's the whole idea of them making this, right, is to enable us to do more things. So we'll continue to expand on it. And the people that are putting these things out obviously have a vested interest, in us using more AI stuff, right? So
Yeah, I've been thinking just a ton about this intersection and how people would want to use an agent in a system that's sort of pre-built for them. So if you're doing some function, like you gave a great example earlier around GRC with security questionnaires. That's an awesome use case for LLMs. And they probably even have some more agentic flows where there's a particular task, there's a goal, maybe there's some metric that the product is trying to move, and we can sort of show the LLM helping with that or the agent helping with that. And then on the MCP side, it's really about, from the organization's vantage point, you might have n number of tools that all have these agents and APIs. What does it look like for us to just create our SecOps agent? What does it look like for us to create our GRC agent that might even have access to internal databases and services, right? And the MCP can kind of be that glue, and then your team's imagination and coding capabilities on top of what engineering is set up. You mentioned Cursor and finding those certain models can really create an interesting ecosystem. So I think,
oh yeah, I mean, we're seeing it already from our internal teams and the things they're playing with, which is pushing my team to then kind of experiment with more things in order to keep up with them. Because when they want to roll out some new AI tool or some new model, they come to us, hey, can you give it a security review? Like, what does that mean nowadays for Gen AI, right? Or anything LM based? It's us basically having to learn about all this stuff, right? And us poking around, just like in the old days of when you first moved to the cloud or when you first thing, right? Your team has to learn it, they have to poke around, they break things, they figure out what works, what doesn't work. So they can then come back and apply it to the work they're doing for the other teams. And so we're kind of in that stage now where, again, we're setting up our own servers, we're playing with different agents, we're playing with the different providers, with wrappers, we're playing with MCP, we're playing all that stuff to see what it kind of can do, what it can't do, where its weak points are. So when engineering comes to us, hey, we had this great idea. We're like, okay, hold on, let us take a look at this, right? And then, we kind of have that perspective where we can say, hey, you can do that, but, you put these different controls in place, or maybe you should, pivot a different direction or whatnot. Because often, as I'm sure your product engineering team, like they're focused on capability. They're focused on bringing a new feature to market. They're not worried about, oops, this gave away all of our customer data. And that's where we kind of come in as a stopgap. But again, unless we're, at least semi well versed in these things, like we couldn't provide any value. So hence why that's, we poke around and play with it internally. So we have that knowledge. So when we review the applications, we can actually give some concrete, useful feedback.
how do you think that AI just generally will help up level security teams? So you just listed one catalyst of like the organization is moving, we have to move with them. But in terms of doing the job better and sort of, elevating your team, like what are you most excited about the AI?
Well, what I hope to see down the road, this is where I hope to start seeing it in, kind of managed service providers first, and then hopefully us shortly after that, once it's figured out, is just the productivity increases. Like be able to not even necessarily the productivity increase would be the big win. It was just the effectiveness, how much better we can be at doing our jobs. Again, like I've been to shops where, you're generating, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of alerts, all the time. And you have capacity to look at maybe 5 to 10% of them max. And everywhere I've been, again, like it's just a matter of time till you get burned by something you didn't look at or something you did look at that you missed, right? And having AI be able to come in and again, kind of weed out the stuff you don't have to worry about automatically, leaving us with that subset of things we should look at and being able to really intensely focus with the people resources you have and with the AI resources you have. Hopefully we'll become much better at what we do, and there'll be less breaches, less issues across the board, data leaks, whole 10 yards. So I'm really looking forward to, hopefully this, again, helping us be more effective at actually doing security, from many different angles. And again, if you have a mature process in place, you're actually measuring the effectiveness of what you're doing, you can actually prove that with data.
I think it's going to be really funny when, you start working with these AI vendors, you're going to be like, well, I have these metrics. How do you even move them? I think that's rare to see.
That's what I did at RSA. I walked around to some of the kind of the AI SOC vendors and think, hey, these are my metrics that show how effective I am. How are you going to help move them? And a lot of them didn't have any answers. They could give you data on their tool. Like here's a metric on what my tool, what I think is effective. for my tool. But they couldn't give me any data on how they actually proved it was being effective for like your security operations team in general. Because again, like a lot of the people they're working with don't have super mature programs to actually measure if they're moving the needle or not. Or again, like some of the vendors in this space, the people that have started these teams or started these companies don't have a security operations background to begin with. So it's kind of hard to, oh, we're doing this magic thing, we're solving the problem, but I can't actually articulate in your language how we're solving the problem for you.
Yeah, a lot of the metrics that I've seen from that cohort of the industry are about the amount of tickets that are actioned. So usually they say, oh, well, security teams can only get to 40% of all the tickets. We help them get to 100. So that's like one metric that I've seen. I don't know, it's fine, I think. And then the other one is more about how fast we can resolve the alerts as well. So the first one's okay because it doesn't really talk too much about if they're important, if they're the right things. But I think just broadly, I really like your snippet about, we want the AI to look at 100% of everything and weed out the things that we, are known knowns, or that the AI can add some context to the alert that it may have been missing for whatever reason. So I'm certainly in agreement with you on that. I think that's a huge possibility with AI. And obviously we have to be really careful about biasing our LLMs and our prompts and things like that, because that can really go sideways.
Oh yeah, totally. When I think about like how do you show effectiveness? Again, like to your point, that vendors are showing, hey, look, we can do things faster. Okay, faster compared to what? If we don't have enterprise metrics around, what's the standard SLA for a ticket in a SOC? Who knows? You ask, some people say 5 minutes, some people say 3 hours. Again, there's no baseline to actually say that, we're doing it 57% faster than a human based on what? Based on we went to some SOC cook-off, whatever it is, flunk through or somebody through, right? We threw our tool at it and we were the top 1%. Okay, in that particular test case you were. But I mean, that's one particular test case. And again, every company, how they set up is different. Their processes are different, if they even have processes. And then, again, that goes kind of back to my experience having done this for so long, is the inputs are the same, the outputs are the same. You have some, risk come in, you have a resolution at the other side. But how you get from point A to point B, every company, how they do it is different. And so again, if you can solve one problem, doesn't mean you're going to solve all the problems. And this is where I wish I had deeper metrics around kind of how they're solving these problems. Like, okay, you solved 100% of the problems. How did you solve them? Like, what were the dispositions you went to the other side? How many were true positive, false positive, benigns, duplicates, tickets that didn't belong to you that should go someplace else? Like, do you have actually data around that? Like, what did you actually do to resolve these things? Was it just true positive, false positive, and you just threw it all away? Like, how do you actually quantify that effectiveness? Like, it's just like the time. We're doing it 50-something% or twice as fast as humans. Compared to what? What human? Like, how did you measure? Oh, we do it all in 2 minutes. The human takes 10 minutes. What type of alert is it? What type of resources they have available to them? Were they at a huge mega company where they have 1,000 vendors in the ecosystem, or is it a 2-person startup where they have one tool? It's like the context adds a lot to that. Hence why, like, if you have your own metrics around the effectiveness of your team, then it doesn't become arbitrary anymore. You actually can have needles you can watch move to see if these tools are actually making an impact or not. And this is the point I was trying to articulate to a lot of these vendors. I'm like, saying you can do it, 100%. Again, what's the outcomes you're delivering to the business? Tickets are all closed. I can do that myself. I just go close. Or it's like, Anton Chuvakin saying, hey, you want a 0% false positive rate, just turn your SIM off. Problem solved, right? Again, you can come to those outcomes all day long, but how are you getting there? And how do you actually show the effectiveness of your tool? So again, like, I close all the tickets, that's not a real metric to me. Or I did it in, X amount of time, which is X, it's Y faster than a human, again, compared to what? It kind of goes back to, it reminds me of, when I was at the Salesforce, we were a big Splunk shop, and we had our detections. They were scheduled to fire every 2, 4, 6, 8 hours, depending on what the detection was. And we measured our mean time to detect. And the spikes happened at 2, 4, 6, 8 hours. I'm like, wow, amazing. Our mean time to detect is when our scheduled searches were fired. Why are we measuring that? We know what it is, right? It's going to be the same every single day. There's a spike at 2, 4, 6, 8 when your searches ran. That's your mean time to detect. It was just it's a useless metric. It's more of a vanity metric, right? And some of these vendors are kind of measuring the same thing. They're measuring against themselves.
I love it. I learned so much just listening to that.
Yeah, like I'm throwing people under the bus here. I don't mean to.
No, I think it's good. I think it's good to be contrarian and just to talk about effectiveness, because you bring a lot of points up. Mean time to detect is fully dependent on the infrastructure. It's not like, I think the problem with a lot of these is that they aren't objective, right? I actually was taking notes as you were explaining this, just because I had so many ideas on how to be more concrete on certain things, especially when it comes to AI triage. I think number of tickets closed. Yeah, you're right. Like, okay, so what? And as long as that so what you can answer is like, because we're helping the business in some way, or we're helping prove that our security controls work, or whatever it may be, it's time to go back to the drawing board probably.
Yeah. Like if you can measure your outcomes that you're delivering to the business, just like a mature security operations function would, then it becomes very easy to prove your value. I made a LinkedIn post a few months ago saying, I kind of reused that meme of, we want the AI to, do our dishes and laundry so we can do art and write, right? We don't want the AI doing the art and writing so I can do my dishes and do the laundry. It's kind of the inverse. And if you look at what security operations teams do, 95% of it is dishes and laundry. And I have, again, some more data promotion on LinkedIn around kind of what security operations teams do. And, 5% or less of what they do is actually catching bad guys, true positives where, something bad's happened. The other 90%, 95% of it is trying to get to that last 5%. Everything from, people's reporting phishing emails to having duplicate tickets, all the way through the whole gambit. And that is the dishes and laundry, trying to get to that 5% of what it is you want them to actually, that's the high impact work you want them working on. But until you identify the outcomes you're delivering to the business, you have no idea how effective you are. And once you do figure out the outcomes you're delivering to the business, then you can realize where your pain points are at. Oh, look, we're spending, 50% of our time dealing with phishing emails. Why? And this is an actual use case. When I was at Salesforce, half the SOC's time was dealt with phishing emails. We had so many people reporting them all the time. But until you actually identify, again, the outcomes you're delivering to the business, what you're doing, you don't know what you're doing well or bad. You don't know what the problems are you're supposed to address and what you're not trying to address. And so when you hear, CISOs, oh my God, alert fatigue, we're drowning in alerts. Okay, what kind of alerts? I don't know. Your own problem. You just shot yourself in the foot at that point, right? And until you know what the problem is, you can't fix it.
The way I wrote it out is, tell me if this is accurate. So you start with the outcome, the why, right? It's like, why are we doing this? And then what metrics help us understand if we're doing that? And then what capabilities help move the metric? And then the way I would think about it next is, well, how can we insert AI to help the capability? And then how, at the last bit of this, I guess like humans are really the base of all of this, but I think then it goes to like the work we're doing. Do you think that's like an accurate characterization?
Like, yes. The way I measure this is really basic. Just use tickets, right? You have something come in, wherever it came from, a person or a tool or whatever it is, wherever the noise came from, it goes in a ticket. Ticket's put in a queue. The person pops off the queue. in your SOC, like IT help desk would, or any other kind of tier one function would, and they have a certain SLA, say an hour, to figure out if this is good or bad, what they should do about it. And hopefully you've put enough context in that ticket, using your SOAR platform or whatever you have, or your detection pipeline, to enrich that. And so they can actually make a quick decision what they have to do with the ticket. And then once they make a decision what they have to do, hopefully you have the fields in the ticket where they can actually articulate that. Okay, I see this is a phishing email. Okay, I'm going to put that disposition in. Okay, this is a true positive. Okay, mark it as a true positive. It's a real legit phishing email. What does happen after that? I have to, either I take action or I forward to the IT team, the email team, whoever it is, because now somebody has to look up the message ID, go through all the email boxes, delete it, blacklist that person's email address, whatever it is. But when you start measuring these things and start figuring out what you're doing, you can start seeing, based on volume and based on time, what's eating up your team's time. And then you can start working to eliminate that. So again, like, the example I gave earlier is when I first got to Salesforce, half of my SOC's time was dealing with phishing emails. We had 50,000 people, and that problem grows linearly, right? The more people you add, the more reports you're going to have. And so that was eating up tons and tons of our time. It wasn't until I started measuring what we were doing that I knew that. Until I actually did that, our SOC was like, we need more tools. We need PCAPs. We need this. We need that. Will help us go faster. And I'm like, actually, no, that's not your problem. The problem is you spend way too much money or way too much time on these manual processes. Once I fixed that, I figured out that the next problem we had was context switching. Again, this is a process. We had over 850 vendors in the security ecosystem of Salesforce, through acquisitions, through fabric environments, everything else. We had tools all over the place. And if you're doing an investigation and an alert comes down, from, oh, this is a data center in South Korea. Okay, cool. Like, what tool is this from? I don't know. I have to figure out how to get to the console. How do I get to this tool? How do I get to that tool? And you're having to pivot between different consoles, different tools. So you have to find, where the console is, where it lives at, authentication information, what the information is looking for. That was the next biggest time suck of our team. Again, none of these things are things where, a new shiny object would have solved it. It was more of a process problem. Like, why are we context switching? Why are we having to jump between our tools? Why do we have some people reporting phishing emails? So it kind of points to a root cause that then you can go after and address. And that's when you start finding the problem and then finding the right tool to apply to it. So for the phishing problem, I know that I'm hoping that the LLMs, that's something they're just going to crush here pretty soon. So we're using them to make phishing emails. Why can't we use them to actually figure out if they are or not? And then automatically take action to remove the things. Because for a lot of teams, that's one of their top time sucks for their security operations teams, is dealing with phishing emails. It's not sexy. It's not exciting. Again, that's the laundry and the dishes that nobody wants to do. And these are the problems that AI can come in and solve for us. And that will leave your team to work on the highly impactful things, like the actual true positives, which kind of irks me when I went to RSA and I see vendors that are like, oh, look, we caught this APT actor that broke into your network and we kicked him out for you automatically. Like, that's great. That happens maybe once, twice in someone's career. How about the phishing emails that I deal with every single day? Like, crush those. That will impress me. Not the fact you caught the latest Chinese APT or North Korean APT crept down your network, right? And in any event, like, those are the problems that your team is there to solve. Like, why are people getting security operations to begin with? Why are they working on the SOC? They want to catch bad guys. They want to make a difference. If you take away that work from them, oh, don't worry, all the true positives we're taking care of for you. We're going to leave you all the crap. Like, no one's going to want to do the job. They're going to straight up bail. Or conversely, when you hear vendors, oh, we'll make your team 10x more productive. The AI tools, we're making 10x more work. That's great. Now I can go from working 8 phishing emails per day to 80 phishing emails per day. That's great. Like, nobody wants to hear that. They want to hear that tool will make that problem go away. So again, coming from a leadership point of view, I want my people working on the most impactful problems that I have. And that's, the true positives, the bad guys. I don't want them working on, oh, this is a duplicate alert. I have to merge them and close it. I don't want them working on, oh, this is a questionnaire for security. I want to forward the GRC. All the other 95%, again, of the dishes and laundry, I want that to go away first. And that I could actually measure and show that you're making an impact. Even if it's not, again, super sexy, you're not catching the APT, like, you are moving the mountain for me. You're freeing up my team to actually do that impactful work that I want them to do. At the same time, that's the work your team wants to do. And so you're kind of removing that, you're taking that burnout that comes from all the repetitive crap work, and you're backing it out. You're allowing them to do the things that they want to do, which is why they're there.
Erik, you've given a lot of really good advice already in the show so far, and I've really enjoyed hearing your perspective on everything. But to wrap things up, like, what's one final piece of advice that you'd give folks listening in who might be leading a SecOps team or working inside of a SecOps team?
I would really say focus on the fundamentals and the basics first. Like, you have to have a process in place, whether you're using, tickets or some way to track your work. So you can have some of the basic metrics around what you're doing, mean time to respond, mean time to detect. Those aren't real metrics, so that they're not really actionable. When you start having data, again, around the outcomes and dispositions you're delivering to the company, around your SLA times, your resource utilization rates, even detection engineering, how much time are you spending on making new detection versus tuning it? And how many times is it being tuned? Things that you can take action on, actionable metrics. These are what's going to help you move your program forward because you'll be able to identify what you're actually doing. You'll be able to see what your time sucks are that you can go after. You'll be able to see what you're not doing very well versus what you are doing well. And then when you start coming up for, you're doing your roadmap and you're planning for next year, the issues you have to ask for budget for, because you can subjectively support your ask because you have data. Again, just like the other business units in the company have, they have data to back up their asks. If you come with data to back up your asks, again, the outcomes not only justify products, they justify budget.
Erik, thanks so much for the time. Really enjoyed getting your download on all things metrics and effectiveness. And I think what you revealed is really that it's often the fundamentals that are most important to get right, and then building everything else on top of that. But if you don't have the fundamentals, it's hard to know that you're doing good work. And I loved all of the emphasis on making sure that your team's doing the impactful stuff that makes them, motivated to continue doing a really stressful job, which is SecOps and security as a whole. So I really appreciate that leadership that you bring just broadly into industry.
Well, thank you. And I know we didn't really, dive into the, the exciting LLM and generative AI space and how it can apply. But again, like probably 2/3 of all the shops I see aren't to a place where they could actually utilize a tool like that effectively. Which, I hate to say that being in this space, that's just been my experience. And from what I've seen with peers and whatnot, there are some places that can use some of these cool things, and I'm hoping we all get there, because I see the potential and the impact these tools can make. But again, if you don't have, a tool is not going to solve a broken or missing process problem.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, Erik. It was awesome chatting with you. To get more episodes on Detection at Scale, go to detectionatscale.com. We put some blog posts up there as well on a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, actually. So like Gen AI and SIM, just more so the transformation of where SIM and security ops is going. And a lot of that is inspired by these conversations. And yeah, Erik, anything to plug? Are you guys looking for particular folks?
I mean, the company's always hiring. We're growing like crazy over here. We're launching some new products. We're hopping in different clouds. We're expanding our footprint more into Asia. And so while my particular team, we just hired our last 2 roles this week. I will have some more in Q4 opening up. But across our company, we're hiring in engineering, DevOps, sales, marketing, HR, everywhere.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again, Erik. Great chatting with you.
Thanks.